Panelists, can you join me up front? I feel like after every presentation, I'm like, sold, let's do it. I'm ready, sign me up. Awesome. Thanks, everyone. So I'm trying to be cognizant of time and make sure we have some space for Q&A. So I'm gonna kind of go with a couple of targeted questions up front. I'm curious about, for whoever, I think this is a question to whoever wants to jump in, but the whole idea of building trust in something new, that's a new behavior, a new service, something that's like kind of so integrated into every community. What were the first steps that you all took to be able to build trust in the user you're designing for? You want to go first, Thomas?
Sure. I mean, insurance is about trust. That's all you sell, nothing else. And the concept of index insurance and sort of because of the unit economics of element of reaching smallholder farmers has been there for very long. The question is always that, remember, you have to, over time, iterate. Sort of you build your models, your actual models at the back end. But then those models, most of the times, are maybe 80, 70% accurate. But the challenge with insurance is that if you want to stick to the rules of the contract, then you have, for every 10 farmers, you have 1 or 2 who are not happy. And immediately that breaks completely the trust, right? And talk to most insurance companies. They say it's always about what is in the contract. So what we did from the word go, we agreed that we know that our models are not accurate. So we set up a fund to pay. If we have a way, we set up a way to sort of verify what is on the ground. Sort of, it's called basis risk. So if the index is saying you're not supposed to be paid, but someone calls us and says, actually, I had a germination failure, we verify with 2 or 3 farmers around them, then we pay from that fund. And for us, we look at that as a marketing cost and an element to build that trust. And of course, you continuously improve your model as you go along. Because as long as you're just sticking to the rules that the index is not supposed to pay, and for sure, that doesn't matter. The farmer doesn't care about satellites and all those things you're talking about. Who is this satellite? Tell them to come here and see that and see that my seed didn't germinate. This guy you're calling satellite, right? So I think you have to be flexible. You have to be very flexible if you want to build trust, especially at the very beginning.
It's like flexibility as well as kind of a guaranteed benefit. Like, we're not going to question you as a user. We're going to just provide a seamless experience from day one. Yeah.
Early on with our foot pumps, we provided a 1-year guarantee. That's unheard of in Myanmar. It was like, what's a guarantee? And, you know, and so people couldn't believe that, oh, if this breaks or something, that they would get a new one. And so that was highly unusual, and we gained trust. And the other thing is with pest and disease outbreaks, we had a hotline number that farmers could call, and you know, they could lose in 3 days their whole crop. And so it's, again, unheard of to have the kind of service where the next day, someone's down there helping them save that crop, and it gets saved, and then the whole village, you know, gains trust as well. So very tangible things like that.
So I think for us, trust is at the core of what we do. And I think there are about probably 3 things that we've done to do that. First, when we were going into the communities at the beginning, we had no credibility whatsoever. So we basically leveraged on the credibility of another organization that had been working there for a while, and got them to help us build credibility by association. The second piece was really around you know, building trust the old-fashioned way, ensuring that you do what you say you're going to do, and to the extreme effect. So for us, as an example, I think it was probably our 2nd or 3rd year in operations, and the factory that we buy fertilizer from, they had a pipeline that was bombed, and they couldn't get gas to make fertilizer. So we had to go out and we figure out how to source fertilizer elsewhere, and at a much higher price, but we still sold the fertilizer at the same price that we promised, because we had already committed. and took a trading loss that year, but and make sure we buy a fertilizer and stock it much earlier now. But you know, those pieces are very, very critical.
Deliver on what you promised to do.
It's very simple.
That's awesome.
Yeah. You also have to do a lot about the agent network that you have, the workforce that you have. And the way you can find and work for that is actually working is also about tapping into the existing you know, communities of trust, right? So it could be, so in our case, it was the Ministry of Food and Agriculture, right? It's run by the government. They've been like, you know, they've been working with farmers for years, so farmers still know them and trust them. So we recruit our agents through those programs. You could work through the churches as well. The church is very powerful. In Ghana, in the communities, if you find people who, if somebody's in the church, or maybe a pastor, a young pastor, there could be someone that people trust or somebody in the mosque. So that's one part, finding like great people that people trust. The second one is making sure people that you've selected are actually available and constantly working to respond to questions. And that is tied to the compensation model that you have, right? So you know, the first stage, you find people and then they work for you for some time, but then would they be available when a farmer has a question? Would they be like, you know, motivated enough to treat the farmer with respect? And that is connected to how much money they make from the business model that you have. So, you know, tapping into the network of trust and also building a compensation structure that actually, like, you know, motivates your agents to actually respond to the needs of farmers.
That's awesome. Did you want to jump in? Or?
I mean, my response would be very similar to everyone else's.
Yeah.
We tried the technology-only solution because our advisors from Silicon Valley thought that was the best way for us to scale. And to our dismay and theirs, those who put money into our company, we had to switch to a model that leveraged those communal relationships and leveraged that equity that already existed. And then the consistency of service delivery. Even when you lose money, a tractor breaks down, you send out another one. You know you're going to lose money on that particular transaction, but over time you build that trust. So you start with the foundation of trust that already exists, and then you grow from there.
That's awesome. I think kind of following on the story of shifting from the Silicon Valley advice, part of kind of the design process is being able to be flexible and shift directions based on the feedback that you're getting on the ground. And I know that, you know, Alloysius, you talked about shifting from SMS to voice, and then I think shifting your model from like a tractor to a platform. How have you been able to? So I'm kind of trying to get at like when have you been enabled by the infrastructure? So I'm thinking about from your investors, from your leadership, like from your setup on the ground to be able to pivot, to be able to grow. And I think the follow-on to that is what would you ask of the folks in this room to enable you to be able to do that better in the future? I'm trying to like make 5 questions in 2 so that we can have Q&A. But so the question is around like So I believe that there's kind of a greater expectation of startups to be able to have the right solution from day one, but being able to iterate and pivot is so important. And I think all of you have done that in various ways. So have you been set up to do that? And should you be able to do it? Should the system set you up to do it better or in a different way?
Yeah, I think the first thing is proximity for us is really important to be able to always be asking questions and be curious of how our customers are doing, and we're held accountable when we're very close to them and we're selling things to them. It's the ultimate accountability. If we put crap out there and they don't buy it, you know, we know right away. So we get that feedback. So that helps us pivot, and I think. In terms of, it also keeps us very flexible in a changing landscape, because things are changing quite quickly in Myanmar. So the proximity piece is super important for us in getting information on time from the customers. In terms of what our investors and donors help us with is giving us unrestricted money, grants, that allow us to pivot quickly and and make mistakes and correct, and without having to worry about budget line items and things like that. And just being able to treat people as customers in selling products is very different from giving them away, because you get that immediate feedback.
That's awesome. Yeah. Aloysius? Oh, sorry, Thomas. Sorry.
Thomas, okay.
Yeah.
From an iteration point of view, there's one complication when it comes to farming. The fact that, for instance, in our case, everything happens once or twice a year, right? So you have a window where you sell, if it's seed, fertilizer, 2 months or 3 months in a year. You miss that, or you just have one opportunity of iteration, right? The traditional, think about the typical concept of iterate, learn, perfect, and then scale. So, but if you try that, you'll struggle, especially because you just always have that 2-3 window of opportunity to learn, and you'll apply it in a year's time. Makes it very slow. So we've had to adopt a different model where you are in 3 or 4 countries, where you do something here, you learn, you transfer it to the next. So in 1 year, at least you have 4 or 5 iterations going round, which, thinking about from some investors, your vanilla type investors, that sounds ridiculous. What are you doing 4 things which you're still iterating? Why don't you perfect one and then scale? But it just helps your iteration as fast as possible, meaning it's expensive in a way, but I think it makes the learning faster, because I think about the product we had 1 or 2 years ago, it's probably changed 10 times. Which does help.
That's a really cool example of kind of prototyping at scale in multiple places. It's really cool. Jehiel, you were going to jump in.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my response is, it was pretty straightforward. I mean, you have to know who your market is, right? So if your market is the end customer, the farmer, then pivoting when there are certain challenges that you face. For Hello Tractor, when we pivoted away from selling tractors, we did it in an environment where Nigeria slipped into a recession. There was credit market contraction. We couldn't finance the machines. The farmers didn't have the capital. The Naira depreciated against the dollar. Effective price of the tractor doubled in a very short period of time. Kola, you know about this. And, but we had to discipline ourselves to our customers' needs so we could continue to grow. But if your customer is a donor, then you have to discipline yourself to their needs, and they have certain impact metrics. So I don't even think it's a binary kind of good or bad thing. I mean, if you ground yourself in who your customer is, then you have to deliver for them. And for Hello Tractor, we've always prioritized our customers, farmers and tractor owners. And so when we pivoted away from trying to sell tractors to selling technology, which is a lot easier to sell in these environments, we capture 75% of all the new tractors that were sold in Nigeria. So that was a success for us. But USAID wasn't happy because they wanted us to sell our little mini tractors. I hope nobody from USAID is in the building. We love USAID.
Let them hear it.
USA is our, America first. No, I'm joking. USAID has changed a lot over the last 12 months, hasn't it? But yeah, so it's just about market discipline. This is on camera. Wow.
I know. Button up that suit, my friend. Awesome. Thank you for that honest answer. Let's take some questions from the audience. When do you want to? I think we have mics coming over. So front row, and then we'll go up to the lady in the back. Or sorry, I was going to have Wendy that's up here in the front.
I wanted to take the conversation in a bit of a different direction, and top of mind for me are women smallholders. And we know that increasing productivity, especially for women smallholders, has huge benefits at the household level. And it gets to these holistic benefits that have been talked about to some degree. How have you been taking women smallholders into consideration with the different types of interventions? Have you had to differentiate? That may or may not be a loaded question. Has your approach changed over time, and what are you thinking about in particular with regards to reaching women smallholders?
Kola.
So women smallholders actually have a lot of similar challenges actually to young smallholders, in the sense that typically they have much smaller plots of land. So their need for productivity enhancement is much higher because they only have, if you have a 0.2 hectare piece of land, you need to really optimize that. The other piece that they have is they've tended to not have investment capital, so they've been mining their soil more. So those small plots of land tend to have lower soil quality, soil health. So their need for a comprehensive soil health solution tends to be greater. We've actually designed our model specifically for that demographic that has that particular challenge. We can finance a farmer as low as 0.1 of a hectare and ensure that they are able to get yields that are typically about 2 to 3 times national average. The challenge we face, though, which is a very vexing issue, is as you move into communities that are more conservative, it's harder and harder to reach women. And we've been really trying to solve that challenge. And through a series of iterations of surveys and talking with different folks, we found out that really the root cause is the fact that their husbands often are not comfortable letting them out and work with organizations like us. So we designed a product that is specifically designed to make the husbands comfortable. And now what we do is we finance their wives, their daughters, their mothers to have retail shops at the home, and then meet with them on a monthly basis to provide training and so on and so forth. And the idea, it's still not proven yet. Our hope is that will now become a pipeline for us to get close to 10,000 women into our program within the next 12 months or so.
Awesome. I think there was a hand. Okay, how about this woman right here?
Thank you. My name is Micah Reinch, and I'm here with the Grameen Foundation. And I have a question particularly regarding the use of the data that is being collected through digital ag initiatives. And Grameen Foundation is, as many of you maybe know, has been an early mover in the area of digital ag. And so we've developed a number of products and services that link digital agriculture with extension workers in Latin America, Asia, and Africa. And we're finding that we have this growing database of really granular data. And in the age of big data, we're starting to look at what we're doing with that and try to view it as an asset that we have, and collectively in the industry we have. And so Grameen just had a webinar on Monday in collaboration with USAID's Global Development Lab. And we're really trying to launch a conversation about what we can do with this data so that it can better serve smallholder farmers and our industry. So I'm curious if any of you are thinking about that and what you're doing with the data that you're collecting.
Can I answer that one?
Sure, yeah, go for it.
Data privacy, I mean, you saw what happened yesterday. Zuckerberg was on the Hill. And so data privacy is something that, at least in the US, our default setting is we have to self-govern because the regulatory environment has not evolved with the generation and exploitation of data, right? So we were fortunate to work with Sidley Austin on revising our data privacy policies to be not in alignment with just the United States, but also what's coming down the pipeline in the European Union, which is much more conservative in terms of how you can use data. And until we're comfortable with how we can use this information, particularly these connected tractors are mapping farmers' fields, right? They're mapping transportation routes, planting times. There's a lot of implications to this information. And so how we self-govern is we don't share that or do anything with that data externally until we are comfortable with what the deeper implications might be, right? And it's a very complicated topic that I don't think anybody has wrapped their minds around. So erring on the side of caution will probably benefit not only the smallholder farmers, but the companies that serve them, because you can find yourself in a lot of trouble if you move too quickly.
Yeah, please, Thomas.
Yeah, from our side, we collect data in 2 ways. We collect data, we give tools to companies, food companies that are working with farmers to collect data and store it. When we do that, that data is not for us, it's entirely for them, it's their proprietary information, so we can't do anything about it. We can look at it, but we can't touch it. And then we collect data from the farmers that we work with, like, directly in Ghana as well. So we use that information, to help us to track the demand of resources that they require, how much they can pay, and all that. And often we get a lot of people coming to us, especially large input manufacturers that are trying to have direct access to farmers, and then they all come asking us the wrong questions. They're like, can you give me database of the 100,000 farmers that you have with their phone numbers so that we can call all of them and try and sell inputs to them? And we said no. First of all, we can't give that to you because by the laws in Ghana, we have the Ghana Data Protection Act that doesn't allow us to do that. And two, giving you that information will be useless because you can't, because what they want to do is sell, build the right package of input that farmers require, price it well, and give it to them. If I give you the phone numbers and then you send out phone calls to them or you send SMS, you're not going to get a return that you want. So let us provide you insight and advise you on how you can distribute your product. First of all, how you can build your product and tailor it to the needs of the farmers in our community, and how you can distribute it at a price point that farmers can afford. So we encourage them to ask for the insight, actionable insight, business insight, that will help them, to distribute more to farmers versus asking for the raw data, because everybody's asking for raw data. In most cases, they might not need the raw data itself. They might need the insights that they can get to help their business.
Yeah, so just to talk a little bit about something different about data. So we think in some of these markets, the biggest issue is that you have fragmented pieces of data where everyone is trying to collect the data. No one has the efficiencies, and no one has a view, sort of a full view of the data. So to give you two examples. One, so you have the input companies don't have a view of their customer completely, right? And at the same time, so you'll have, they have their own initiatives, for instance, seed companies to collect the data, fertilizer companies, chemical companies, which don't yield much fruit, right? So how we approach it is that for much of the activities, especially what we do with input companies when we bundle the product, so our agreement is that that data is owned centrally, and then anyone can benefit from it. So basically what we view at Pula from a data point of view is that build an ecosystem where you have all these players can plug in and build a data where everyone can benefit from it. As long as it's not about you, and at the end of the day, as long as they use this to benefit the smallholder farmer, then you build the scale in terms of to be able to collect that data. Because think about it, we are collecting this data for insurance. But again, you can use the same data for farm advisory. Then you have companies that are spending enormous amounts of money to do digital farm advisory. Their cost of acquisition of that data is significantly high. So then how do you go about building the scale efficiencies around it? Secondly, for another one of our products, area yield insurance, we collect a lot of yield data. Probably you have a repository of a lot of yield data in Nigeria, 9 countries across Africa. Now, the question is, of course, the cost of acquiring that data, the yield data, is high. But then the question is, who else would be interested in that data? Then you reduce the cost to each of the users. I think if we start looking at it from a point of reducing the cost of data acquisition, and secondly, as long as it's properly policed to the benefit of the owners of the data, who are the farmers, right? Because it's farmer data at the end of the day. Yeah.
Cool. I think we are at time, unfortunately. But this has been an amazing panel. Thank you, all of you, all the panelists for coming. Thank you all for coming.